The structure that Access uses to assemble the reports on the page is kind of like building a layer cake, or maybe even blueprints for a skyscraper. There are multiple sections that get designed one time each, and then Access uses that blueprint over and over again as it needs them for each section of the report. Let's take a look at how this works. Right now I'm back in the Kinetico database, and I've got a query that I just built called Orders by Region. If I run it, we can see that it counts up all of our orders that appeared in each region for each year. So for instance, in 2008 in the Midwest region, we had 2 different divisions that had orders. 3 orders in the East-North Central division, and 2 orders in the West-North Central division. In the Northeast region in 2008, we only had 1 division, Mid-Atlantic, with 9 orders. Let's go ahead and build a report off of this data. Let's go ahead and close out the query. And with the Orders by Region query still selected in my navigation pane over here, I'm going to go to the Create tab, and in the Report section, I'm going to press Report here to build a basic report. That'll apply some default styling to our report and leave us in Layout View. Let's go ahead and switch our view over here into Print Preview. Now we can go through the different sections of this report. At the very top of the page, I have what's called a report header. The report header appears at the top of the very first page of the report. The next section down here has these titles here that say year, region name, division name, and count of order ID. This is called a page header section. The page header section will appear at the top of every single page. Next, we have these areas down here where the data appears, where it says 2008, Midwest, and so on. Each of these constitute a single instance of a detail section. Let's go ahead and scroll down. At the bottom of the report, we have what's called the page footer. The page footer appears at the bottom of every single page in the report. In this case, the page footer indicates how many pages are in the report. Let's go ahead to page 2. I'll press this button here. And we'll scroll back up to the top. We have another instance of the page header that appears at the top of every page. More detail sections here with the data. Let's scroll down here. And when we run out of data, we have this section down here. This is the report footer. Right now, the report footer section is counting up the number of records from the query. And finally, at the bottom of page 2, we have another instance of the page footer. Let's go ahead and switch this into Design View to see what it looks like there. I'll go ahead and close Print Preview, which will take me back to Layout View. I'll go over here to my View menu and change to Design View. Now in Design View, this report looks completely different. You notice that we have each section, but it's only represented one time. So here's our report header. Then we have the page header section with the labels for the columns. Then we have the detail section where our data appears. Then we have the page footer with the calculation for the page numbers. And finally, the report footer that has that counting calculation here. So we only have to design each section one time, and Access will reuse these pieces as many times as it needs to accommodate the data that we give it. So because of that, we need to make sure that our report structure is as compact as possible. So for instance, if I go into this detail section, this is where our data appears, and I move my mouse cursor to the bottom of it, right above where it says page footer, I'll get this cursor here. Let me go ahead and drag down to add a little bit of white space in this detail section. Now that might not seem like a big change, but if I go over here and change my view, I'll switch to the Design tab and change my view back to Print Preview, you notice that I get all this white space, and since it's repeated over and over and over again, it dramatically affects the size of my report. Now we're at a total of 4 pages instead of 2, and you can see how much space is added to every single record. Let's go ahead and switch back into Design View. I'll close Print Preview, and that'll take us back to where we were. So I'm going to take this detail section and collapse it up again so it's really tight. In the last movie, we talked about grouping levels. When it comes to header and footer sections, each grouping level can have its own header and footers. We can change the grouping either in Layout View, like we did in the last movie, or in Design View, which is the view mode that we're in right now. And we'll use the grouping and sorting pane just like we saw earlier, right down here on the bottom. The nice thing about doing it in Layout View is that it moves items around for us automatically as we make changes. So let's take advantage of that. I'm going to switch out of Design View and go into Layout View by going to the menu here and choosing Layout View. Now what if I wanted to take this report and view all of the data based off of the same region instead of looking at it by year? Well, we can do that by adding a group. I'll go down here, say Add a Group, and we'll group on the region name. When we do that, all of the regions get grouped together. So all of my Midwest data gets put together here, and then I have the years, divisions, and count of orders down below. If we wanted to sort it by year, we could add a sort here, and then choose to sort it by year. Now we can sort it from smallest to largest, in which case it's going from the earliest year to the most recent, or I can flip this around and go from largest to smallest. Let's go back into Design View and see what changes it made there. I'll change my view here to the Design tab, and in the View menu, I'll go back to Design View. Now we have this new section here called Region Name Header, and the region name moved from the Detail section up into the Region Name Header. So every time we switch to a new region, we'll get an instance of this region name, And then below that, the data will appear. Let's take a look at this in Print Preview now. I'll go to the Design tab and switch my view to Print Preview. Now if I scroll through my report, I can take a look at these headers here at the top. For instance, right in here, it says region name, and there's the region name, and then year, division name, and count of order ID for the data that falls below. What I'd like to do is take those headers here where it says year, division name, and count of order ID and replicate them every single time we switch to a new region. So what I want to say is have the Midwest region here and then define the columns below that. Then when we run out of data for the Midwest region and switch to Northeast, I'll have those column headers again here so I don't lose track of the data that I'm looking at. Let's go ahead and make that change. I'll close the Print Preview. I'll close Print Preview, and that'll switch me back into Design View, where I'll grab these labels here and I'll just drag them down. We'll take the year label, move it down, division name, move that down, and count of order ID, and I'll click and drag that down. Once again, I'll change my view back to Print Preview to see the change. And now every time I switch to a new region, for instance, Northeast, I have another instance of those labels here that appear in the region name header. Now there's one last thing that I want to change before we wrap up this movie. I've mentioned this before with forms, but it applies here to reports as well. Access draws boxes around all of these data points whenever we create these automated forms. It drives me absolutely nuts. Let's go ahead and get rid of these boxes so we can see how it increases the legibility of our report. I'll go ahead and close the Print Preview window. That'll take me back to Design View. I'm going to click into my report, and then I'll press Ctrl-A to select everything. We'll go up to the Format tab and go to Shape Outline and switch it to Transparent. Let's go ahead and select off of it. Then I'll go to the Home tab and change my view here to Print Preview. And you can see a much cleaner view of my data here without all those extra boxes. So you'll see the same header and footer options available to you when you design forms as well. But they're really only applicable to forms set up with the continuous view property turned on, like our scrolling employee directory. So headers and footers are of limited value in forms, but they work exactly the same way there. In reports, however, headers and footers, coupled with grouping and sorting levels, create the primary structure within which your data will be organized.